morning, everybody, and welcome to our International Women's Day seminar. Today, we've got a huge feast for women entrepreneurs. This is the first in a series of seminars to help women media practitioners lead media, own media, engage media, really just wanting to raise the profile of women in media as much as possible. We want to essentially build a network of women who will change the media landscape on the African continent. We do recognize that the only way that we can actually do that is by ensuring that we support women leaders, by giving them the skills, by giving them access to opportunities, giving them knowledge, giving them resources, including financial resources and ongoing encouragement to take up the rightful place in the media sector. Our first panel discussion is starting up in an artificial intelligence world. And we have three incredible guest speakers who are going to be really supporting us and sharing their expertise with us. I'm going to start off by doing something that I never ever thought that I would do. Artificial intelligence, AI, is rapidly transforming various industries, and the field of journalism is no exception. In Africa, AI is being used to improve the quality and speed of news reporting, enhance data analysis, and streamline news distribution. AI can assist in the production of news. It can assist with fact-checking and data analysis, among other tasks. With the growth of the internet and the rise of digital media, there's an increasing demand for fast, accurate, and relevant news, and AI is helping to meet that demand. AI technology is being used to assist journalists in various aspects of their work, such as fact-checking, news aggregation, and even writing news stories. Then, while AI has the potential to revolutionize the way journalism is practiced in Africa, it also poses some real challenges, including the risk of bias and the potential loss of jobs. As such, it's really important for journalists, media organizations, and policy makers to understand the opportunities and risks associated with the use of AI in journalism in Africa. So what have I never done before? I have never before read an introduction that was written for me by a bot. In fact, that was written for me by ChatGPT, and it's just an example of the kinds of things that AI can actually do and how AI can be used across the continent. Part of our challenge today is to look at both the advantages and the disadvantages of actually looking at AI, where we can use it, where we need to be wary of the challenges that AI poses, and what we can do, in fact, to make sure that we are aware of the ethical challenges of AI. Today's speakers have incredible experience, practical experience of using technology. Our panel for the starting up in an AI world is Christophina Shalongo, who is a Mozilla Senior Tech Policy Fellow, Kate Wilkinson, who's a Senior Product Manager at Fullfact, and Mo Malela, who is an entrepreneur, poet, and marketer, and runs an incredible app that she's going to, I hope, tell us a bit more about when she speaks. So let's start off with Christophina, who was, so Christophina was formerly a digital media practitioner at the Central Bank of Namibia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to Paula and the team for the invitation, and for all of you for joining this workshop so early in the morning. It shows your commitment to advancing AI and also journalism and media as a whole. As Paula introduced me, I am a Senior Tech Policy Fellow at the Mozilla Foundation. I've previously worked at Research ICT Africa, and so a lot of my work is based in advising on public policy as well as corporate policy in some instances. So I'm just going to talk briefly, very shortly, about artificial intelligence, media, and how it intersects with policy. And sometimes that's not very exciting for a lot of people, but I think it's an important discussion that we should be having. So I think Paula's little synopsis from ChatGPT explained it very well, and on how AI has impacted the media industry. There are three main ways that technologies that have emerged from that: algorithms, how that's on content recommendations, data analytics, determining trends on Twitter, TikTok, and other platforms. Machine learning is mostly used in content moderation, classification of certain profiles and certain discourses, categorizing of accounts, as I just said. So, and also in assisting with media finding their target audience. And then there's also natural language processing, which is impacting chatbots, filters, even on email. When you send out marketing emails, that's also based on like natural language. Oh my gosh, processing and document and sometimes document analysis. So there are many opportunities. It has made journalism fun. It has made it accessible to a lot of people. It has enhanced creativity, as we've seen with TikTok. But there are, of course, some risks. And some of them we've seen is the exacerbation of information disorders. Those are called misinformation, disinformation, so spreading of false news or purposefully misleading the public. Of course, we've seen unethical media practices. So, sometimes media companies taking advantage of or manipulating the public, as we've seen with Cambridge Analytica, influencing elections in different countries. We've seen a rise in targeted harassment, so racial and gender profiling. Women are increasingly experiencing harassment online. It's very hard. It's becoming hard, to find like hidden social media sexual content involving minors. Echo chambers as well, are allowing groups like incels, for instance, to kind of like attack certain individuals. And it also impacts media freedom in terms of surveillance from the state or other entities. And in terms of like innovation, big tech monopolies have, I think, in a way, are stifling innovation in that, if like how Facebook has acquired Instagram, so there's just a concentration of a few big tech companies who own these platforms. And I think one of the speakers, I think, will be able to speak to the, how the changing landscape of media, how it was, this industry and this establishment, different establishment, but now it's mostly based on platforms. It's mostly on the internet. And the promotion of discriminatory practices. There's a discussion about censorship on certain platforms like TikTok, shadow banning, bias virality in terms of like when certain groups, Black women, for instance, come up with things, their videos don't go viral. Instead, other demographics, when they appropriate that, it goes viral. So those are all the risks, but also like the disadvantages that are impacting, especially journalism, journalists, the media, as well as content creators and media practitioners in Africa and other countries or regions outside of what we call the West. So, I mean, we're here to talk about innovation. Sorry, we're here to talk about innovation and how do you fit into this, and what does AI policy mean to you? I think there are two important things to consider. I think especially for journalists and media entities, there's a responsibility on your end or our end to advocate for the development of public and private sector policies which protect human rights. I think the most popular ones are freedom of expression, access to information, rights to privacy. So speaking about these things, writing about these things, and there's a policy. I mean, innovation is often limited to technology, but there's also policy innovation of writing and informing the public that, hey, the way that social media is currently or the media is currently operating can be different. So sorry. And another one is also related to that, but in more focused on innovation. I think often when we talk about innovation, it's only tied to like an I don't know, like having startups, innovate some sort of platform or whatever, but it's also like about advocating for policies and laws that will enable small players to also be able to not innovate. So proprietary laws, which talks to like ownership improving data sharing and standards. That is, in terms of like, if you have access to data and you are able to, people are able to share it, I think it encourages innovation and people can come up with solutions that fit their contexts. Data localization, if only big tech companies own data, it means that they are the ones who are able to, drive innovation in the ways that they want to, and encouraging open data. And I think this is one that I really want to highlight in terms of on the African and innovation, because open data and having data sets accessible to everyone will allow people, as I just said, to innovate in certain ways. One of a very good example is the Common Voice project, spearheaded by my colleagues at Mozilla, and they are basically collecting different accents from the African continent. They're introducing, different languages like Swahili. So, the internet should not only be for people who speak English, people who speak French, languages in certain regions. So I think that as well impacts innovation, and it is important that as media practitioners, as journalists, as entities, we speak about these things, that our policymakers enable these this kind of environment. And in conclusion, a sustainable innovation requires system thinking. I think oftentimes it's always journalists, media, policymakers, and then big tech, and then it's civil society. I think it is a movement, and we should all be part of that movement. Each of us have different responsibilities which support one another, and most importantly, and I'm so happy that there is an artist on this panel, it is not all work, and no play. I think the internet and AI presents an opportunity for us to be creative, for us to share media in different ways, for us to, it's not only about, economic benefits, it's also about like changing our cultures, it's about changing our societies, and it should be fun. I think it's not should, and I speak specifically to Africans, and I think we're always like, our anger is justified, but I think we should also like grasp or remember, joy, and remember creativity, and remember that these technologies are an outlet to express our creativity. And just to, maybe speak to how this relates to you. Those already, in managing existing media, I think it's important to adhere to ethical media practices. I spoke about the threat of media freedom, but also like the exploitation of that media entities pose to or practice. So adhere to ethical media practices. I know it's nice to have your video go viral, or I know it's nice to have some sort of like I don't know, new type of news piece, but is it ethical? Like, does it affect people? We don't want to perpetuate harm. And holding big tech companies accountable. Yes, use ChatGPT, but also talk about the issues about the exploitation of African workers who enabled that technology to work. In terms of media owners, I think the responsibility there lies more on advocating for policymakers to make it mandatory for big tech, for instance, to release adequate public data. I think that will help civil society to advocate or to create to advise for evidence-based policymaking, but also for innovation, and also how allowing us to hold those companies accountable when they harm our communities, and harmonizing ethical standards as media owners, coming up with ethical standards and ensuring that there's a standard, and depending on the region, they work together. Emerging media practitioners, I think when you're new, it's you want your things to go viral. It's exciting. You want to be on every platform. You want to talk about the exciting like technologies, but I think it's also important to like step back and not fall into the trap of perpetuating existing biases. I don't know, like promoting or only hiring content creators or influencers who are white, able-bodied, or who meet a certain societal standard, and staying away from discriminatory practices for your gain. And so I think keeping this in mind, we all have the responsibility to promote a healthy media ecosystem. I think questions will come later, so just if you have any, jot them down. If not, I'm happy to have a discussion later on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I mean, I think that we've got a real opportunity here for some interesting discussions. One of the things that stands out for me, Christopher, and I really want us to come back and talk about it later on, is, very often journalists have this distance from events as they unfold. And so we report on the platforms, we report on what is happening, we stand back and we allow people to debate. And maybe there are a couple of specialist media organizations who are involved in the advocacy or in the policy making. But I think that this is one particular case where if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying we need to be there when they are making policy. We need to hold people account. We need to make sure that right at the beginning, when we're beginning to think about how AI can impact our work, we need to make sure that our voice is also heard. But I want to go to our next speaker, who is Kate Wilkinson. Kate is a senior manager at Full Fact. Kate, over to you.
Thanks, Paula, and thank you so much, Christofina, for that really great introduction to a lot of the bigger picture that we need to be thinking about as we discuss what are very exciting developments, but a reminder of the very serious implications that we need to keep in mind as we sort of go into this brave new world with all the technologies that are on offer. So as Paula has said, I am a senior product manager at FullFact. FullFact is a fact-checking charity. It's an organization that is based in the United Kingdom. However, I am based in Johannesburg, South Africa, where I live, and I have lived and worked in fact-checking, media development, training, for the past 10 years, primarily in South Africa, but also with colleagues around the world in Senegal, Nigeria, and Kenya. And I started off as a baby fact checker in 2013 when I joined Africa Check, when it was still a startup, and spent almost 10 years with the organization as a fact checker and eventually as deputy chief editor, overseeing editorial output of fact checking in South Africa with the team that is based here. During my time at Africa Check, along with an Argentinian fact-checking organization called Chequeado and FullFact, where I work now, applied for a grant from google.org. They were running a AI Impact Challenge, where they were looking to support a number of grantees over 3 years to support them to see what AI could do for the areas that they were working in. Our group of fact-checking organizations was a recipient of 3 years worth of funding, as well as support and fellows from Google. And they helped us in those 3 years explore the space of fact-checking and how we could use AI and new technology to make fact-checking faster, more efficient, and more impactful. So at the end of those 3 years, we had a proof of concept. We had identified 3 problems that fact checkers around the world faced. And I think this is an important point here, just to emphasize that the group of fact checkers which were brought together in this application for the funding were purposefully located around the world, in the United Kingdom, across Africa, and in South America, because it was vital for us that the planning, the implementation, the training data, the thinking, the context of these tools being built wasn't located in one region, and that it wasn't, as a lot of these tools and technologies have been, located and built in Europe or in America. We wanted perspectives from fact checkers across the world in very different contexts and settings, so that our tools could be universally applicable, and we were choosing that approach to try and reduce the amount of bias that our technology would have because of the context that it was built in. So the 3 problems that we identified that we wanted to solve with technology and AI were, first of all, when it comes to fact checking, and I'm sure most of you will know about Africa Check, which was the first fact-checking organization in Africa, and has a very strong presence in South Africa. The first problem that fact-checkers often face is that they need to monitor a very diverse media landscape. That's traditional media, social media, it's government publications, it's a wide range of information, live broadcast, whether it's television or radio, where public discourse happens, where claims and statements are being made which can mislead people. And due to resource constraints and just the reality of humans trying to monitor an infinitely growing information landscape, we knew that this was a space where AI could help fact checkers find the most important thing to fact check in any given day and reduce the time, effort, and resources that they would need to spend manually monitoring that information landscape. So that's the first tool we built. The second tool looks to increase the impact of fact checkers' work. So we know that when you do a fact check, say there is a claim made by the president of the country about how many houses have been delivered during a certain administration, or how many social grants have been delivered, or the rollout of electricity. Once you have conducted that fact check, unfortunately, if it is a falsehood, often one fact check isn't enough to stop that falsehood being spread again. So we have built a claim matching tool, which is called alerts, that informs fact checkers when something that they know to be false is repeated again. And that allows fact checkers to then decide what sort of action they would like to take. Would they like to publish a new fact check? Would they like to contact the person and request a correction? Maybe they want to put out a press release or an op-ed. And in that way, we're able to increase the return on that initial investment, that initial fact check, so that they can increase their impact on society, on increasing accuracy, on holding people accountable with very little further investment. The last thing that we have been working on, which is still in research and development, is live statistical verification. So if you have, say, the president of South Africa giving the State of a Nation address, and he or she makes a claim about the size of the economy or inflation or unemployment, we are able to give a real-time indication to fact checkers or journalists covering the event, using, say, data from Statistics South Africa about whether that claim is true or false, and providing them a direct link to the data source so they can go further and verify that themselves. So that's a broad overview. A question that I often get asked is, why did I move from 10 years working at Africa Check, which is an amazing place to work, to now working remotely for an organization that is based in the UK? The simple answer to that question is that, having worked for 10 years in fact checking in Africa and South Africa, I am even more committed to the cause of upholding standards when it comes to public figures misleading. I'm committed to accuracy in public debate. I'm committed in changing our information ecosystem to make it harder to mislead, to make it easier to hold people accountable, and to make it easier to access good quality information. But as Christofina mentioned earlier, we're all, in this instance, we're pretty much talking about all the good things that we're using artificial intelligence and technology for. But that technology is also being used by different people, organizations, actors around the world to create false information, to spread false information. Just on a very basic level, the algorithms that we see on social media platforms are able to spread and disseminate posts and false information at a scale and speed that we haven't seen in human history. So having, although very significant and important and impactful teams of fact checkers in countries around the world fighting this misinformation, we need to level up on our side. We need to sort of pump rocket fuel into the work that we do as fact checkers and the media to identify that false information, combat it, fact check it, report on it. And we can't fight the fire of AI and algorithms and machine learning when it's being used for bad if we don't level up on our side. So that's why I made the move to now working in tech, working at scaling and rolling out tools so that we can give fact checkers and journalists and media practitioners around the world the tools that they need to really take on the level of false information that we're seeing. And we've done this in a number of cases around the world. So in South Africa, in the last local government election, I was still at Africa Check, and we were using the tools that had been built by this group of fact-checking organizations. And using the claim detection tools, we were able to review and monitor at scale all of the content that was being put out by key political parties in the lead up to the local government election. So we were able to put in all the manifestos, the tweets, all the media reporting of on these parties and what they were saying they had achieved, what they said they wanted to achieve, so that we were then able to not have to do all that monitoring themselves. Africa Check could review claims and statements which were identified as fact-checkable and worthy of investigation without having to spend the hours or sometimes days of reading through content to manually review it. And based on those tools, 25% of the claims that were fact-checked by the whole organization, so that's in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal, in the 6-month period over the election, were identified by AI. So it's just an example of how you can use these tools to really, assess information at scale in a way that wouldn't be possible if you were just relying on manual reviewing. Another example, just in the past month, we've supported 3 fact-checking organizations in Nigeria in the lead up to the presidential election. Africa Check Nigeria has always had access to the tools as they were key in building and developing them. But what we did at PhilFact was that we extended access to 2 other fact-checking organizations who are accredited with the International Fact-Checking Network, so that they too could use the tools and scale their efforts. And we onboarded 23 new fact checkers. In the weeks leading up to the election, they identified over 30 claims that were being made by presidential candidates that they interrogated. And a big and significant step for us was that we rolled out our live fact-checking capability for a presidential debate that was held in Lagos the week before the election. And what we were able to do, and this also speaks to what Christofina was saying earlier, was that we were able to build a custom solution so that when the fact checkers were live fact checking this debate, we were able to use a live stream of the debate. We were able to run it through transcription service and then provide a live transcript to fact checkers. So they didn't have to transcribe what they were hearing, which meant that they could use their team members for the actual fact checking and research. And our tools were able to highlight to them claims which needed to be fact-checked, as well as statements which they knew to be false that were repeated again, so that they could jump on those and quickly respond and insert accurate information into public discourse at that time to try and catch up with the falsehood. So there's a wide spectrum of organizations that we're working with. I've spoken mainly about the tools that we've rolled out to fact checkers, but these same tools are also being rolled out and made available to other users. So we are talking to media houses, broadcast, radio and television, because these tools could allow hosts, presenters who are interviewing politicians to be informed when a politician repeats something that is false, so that they can challenge them on air and ask them to substantiate their claim. We're also working with civil society organizations who work in the good information space to help them identify hate speech or inflammatory statements that are unsubstantiated. And lastly, we're also working with statistical regulators, such as the Office for Statistic Regulation in the United Kingdom, who have a mandate to monitor and combat the misuse of official statistics. So in conclusion, we've seen enormous development and progress over the last 3, almost 4 years now. We've been lucky enough to secure another 3 years worth of support from google.org. And that support is to take our tools from what was a proof of concept now to a viable commercial product. So our offering now, we are looking to do 2 things with it. One is to radically change the fact-checking community globally and to help them scale their efforts as they fight false information. But the second is to prove that investment in this area can actually result in a sustainable commercial product. The amount of expertise, investment, resources that have been needed to build these tools are not available to the vast majority of fact checkers, let alone media houses. But we are looking to offer these tools to users on a monthly subscription that is affordable and is a fraction of the cost of anything they would spend per year employing a software engineer or a data scientist, so that with no expertise, with no in-house tech capability, any organization can have access to sophisticated, robust, and scalable AI to bolster their work, especially in the area of fighting false information. Thank you so much, Paula.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm sure there'll be questions afterwards. I have a couple more, but I just want to very, very quickly, in real numbers, what's the difference? So when you're not using AI, how many fact checking exercises are you doing versus when you are?
So we have those metrics internally for full fact. So what we have seen is prior to introducing the tools in our organization, our fact checkers were able to identify around 100 claims per day that potentially could be fact checkable. But with the use of our search tool, which looks for claims to fact check, we are able to monitor anything with an RSS feed, social media such as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And on a 24-hour basis, we scrape all of that content, even parliamentary Hansard, so the record of Parliament every day. And we are now looking at around 100,000 statements that we can review on a daily basis. That is still too much for any person to go through, but coupled with that is a very sophisticated filtering system. So you can search by keyword, you can also search by claim type. So maybe you just want to see claims that are about statistics or quantity. And we also have, with the support of Google, we're able to build an entity identification algorithm. So in South Africa, at Africa Check, fact checkers there can look at claims that were just made by President Ramaphosa or by the leader of the opposition. So we have gone from a huge, it's a bit of a funnel, you know, we're able to grab users a whole lot of information, and with our filtering functions, we're able to really get it down to what that user is interested on that day because of the way the public debate is going.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Kate. But our next speaker actually really excites me because she embodies that unusual person who understands business, understands numbers, even as she embraces a very creative and holds a very creative space. Mo Malela holds a Bachelor of Business Science in Finance and Accounting from UCT. And then numerous other, she's got a certificate of small business enrichment from the Center of Entrepreneurship at the University of Johannesburg. But she's doing some really exciting things.
I'm really honored and humbled to be here. I do feel a little out of my depth having listened to both Kate and Kito speak. So I really do hope that I can add some value today. Before I go into a bit of the work that we're doing at Metropolitan and my work also as a poet and a spoken word artist, and the relevance of that in the AI sort of era that we are living. Before I lose my train of thought, I actually want to touch on something that both Kate and Kito shared that I think is a very important thing for us to always come back to when we talk about technology, especially in the era of AI and machine learning and what the future kind of looks like, is the importance of the human in the technology. I think in both what Kate and Kito shared, not once did they negate that there still needs to be a human being at some point in the value chain of what the technology is going to deliver, whether it's the policies that we're building as human beings who are living in this era of AI and we're seeing what it actually means tangibly for us as humanity, or whether it's as a fact checker, checking the facts and checking that the AI is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, or is the AI giving me false information to then report on, right? And in a continent where we're largely a labor market, technology is something everyone is scared of, including our governments. And even when we talk about renewable energy, nobody wants to talk about renewable energy because we're scared of losing all the coal miners' jobs and so forth. So we're such a largely labor focused market that oftentimes people equate technology and the use of technology with the loss of jobs. And even in sort of like the copywriter space and the creator space, everyone's like, well, now that this thing can write the copy, will I still have a job 2 years from now, Mo? People ask me as a poet, will you still be doing poetry 2 years from now, 5 years from now, if ChatGPT can do it for you? And by the way, there's so many others, right? Other than ChatGPT, there's so many other AI writing platforms out there that have been around actually for a lot longer, and yet we still need people to write content and check it and so forth. So there's something I just want to just off the bat highlight, that there will always be a need for the human. There will always be a need for human creativity, human learning, human input, human adaptability in everything that we do. the work, the only thing that technology does actually is change the work, but it doesn't change the fact that the work still needs to be done, right? There still needs to be a human doing the work, but it just changes how we actually do the work. So I just wanted to start off with that before I lose my train of thought, because that's something that I come across a lot, and especially working in the informal sector. So a bit about me, like Paula said, I'm a poet, I'm a spoken word artist, so I've got a very sort of creative side of me. I've got an album out, a digital album. I went against the grain at the height of lockdown and decided to release a digital poetry album. So I didn't release an anthology like most poets would do. I was like, let's put it onto the internet, let's go through Spotify and Apple Music and everything. So the album is literally available anywhere that you stream music across the globe, and it's called My Country Needs Me. The reason why I did this it launched on the 1st of April, so literally 3 days, I think, after we'd gone into the very first lockdown in 2020. And that sort of changed the landscape of what poetry meant to me and how digital can actually help me further my craft across the globe. The album is currently sitting, just to give you some context, the album is currently sitting 6,500 streams away from reaching 1 million streams across the globe, right? Like literally, I'm even just surprised about some of the markets where it has been able to hit, like Pakistan and Russia and whatnot. Just like odd places where I wouldn't think that people are listening to poetry, but that's sort of the power of technology and how far things can travel. When I'm not doing that, my passion project, although it's a for-profit company, but it's my passion project, is a company called Shopperpolitan. So what we do at Shopperpolitan is that we work with informal traders. And what we do is we help them grow their businesses by leveraging e-commerce technology. We are a tech company, but our specific niche at this point in time is e-commerce technology, because we realize just how important it is for a trader anywhere in the world to be able to sell to anyone in the world and to be able to transact, whether there's a lockdown or there isn't a lockdown. If you've got a product or a service that you can deliver value to somebody else, you should be able to access technologies that allow you to deliver that value to anybody across the globe, right? And so that's where we sort of started. And what we do is we work primarily in townships and in rural communities. We identify merchants who have got a solid product, who've got a solid, a business model, and we put them onto the platform, and we actually help them gain access to markets across the country. I'm based in South Africa, across the country, and hopefully across the continent, and then hopefully one day across the world, right? And that's so basically what we call it. At this. So yes, actually, thank you. I'm looking at my notes because I made some notes. I didn't make any slides, so I'm looking at my notes here. But when we talk about AI and we talk about technology in general, our main sort of niche and our main passion point is how do we ensure that at every changing of the gears in technology, we are not leaving more and more people behind. And I think COVID showed us that technology genuinely does have the ability to change lives, to improve lives. Like we're sitting here from across the world, and we're able to share our knowledge and network and engage with each other. Pre-COVID, for many of us, this was not even the way that we engaged, actually. If I couldn't meet you physically, then it was like, I have to fly down or something like that, right? But technology, like I think COVID actually showed us just how much technology, as much as it's a double-edged sword, but how much it can change lives. But unfortunately, at every gear change of technology, we leave more and more people behind, because the further technology goes, the more inaccessible it gets to those who really need that incremental, effect in changing their lives. So case in point, the entrepreneurs that I work with in township communities, who, most of the entrepreneurs we work with, yeah, they experience 3 major challenges, which I think would be obvious to most people in the room. Would be the lack of, knowledge and education about what actually is out there in terms of technology and how they can use it to grow their businesses. So knowledge and education is a big part of our sales process. We go into communities to educate first about e-commerce, about payment gateways, about, transaction fees and everything. And then we go go into the sell. The second major challenge is the lack of infrastructure, which I think is obvious, that the infrastructure is really poor in most of informal communities. And then lastly is the initial cash outlay. So just being able to afford a subscription to a Shopify or, or anything like just that, the amount of money it costs you just to even get onto the interweb is often sort of like prohibitive for a lot of our merchants. And so the model that we have is end-to-end, and it basically alleviates all of those three challenges. I won't go into detail about it, but I'm happy to take questions and share a bit more. I'm just mindful of time. And so for us, when we look at AI, and at this point in time, we're not leveraging AI fully because we're only on the second iteration of our platform, but we're working on the third iteration where we actually want to be able to automate the processes that allow us to identify merchants and vet them according to our vetting structure and put them on board. And then leverage all of the data we're getting on the sites to help to loop it back to all of our merchants so they can continue growing their platforms and continue understanding their businesses better. Our long-term vision is that eventually one day, you'll be able, for those in South Africa who know my example, but you'll be able to go into a local community, regardless of who you are, even if you're a tourist traveling, and be able to go into an app and just order a meal from a local gogo or mama somewhere, making, meals, out of her kitchen, and just order a local cuisine meal online and have it delivered to where you are in the middle of the community. So making those experiences those connections actually more possible through leveraging, technology. So I think that was a mouthful, Paula, but I just want to make sure we've got time for questions and engagement. So yeah.
Absolutely, so much. It's so rich. I'm going to bring in the rest of the panelists and add them to the spotlight. And then we've got one question just right off the bat. Jermaine is asking, when we talk about the importance of the human in the mix, why is it important that some of these humans are women? I mean, what do we lose when women aren't involved in the tech and AI space?
I'll take a stab at it. This is very interesting because just yesterday, because today is International Women's Month, so happy Women's Month to everyone. I think that's why we're here today. I was actually just writing an article, well, not an article, but a blog post on our site titled that women are the engines of the economy. And I think when like to actually directly answer the question is what do we lose when women aren't involved in tech and AI spaces? We actually lose bits and pieces of the engine that actually run the economy. There are just more women in the world. There's women raising families, raising children. And I mean, I don't want to mention numbers and everything because I'm sitting to a fact checker. But it is proven that when women thrive, economies grow, economies thrive. That countries with more gender equality and a lesser and a smaller, gender gap actually have stronger economies. They've got faster growing economies rather, So I think it's very important for us to introduce women into the tech and AI space. I'll once again come to the point I made about ensuring that at every gear change in technology, we're not leaving people behind, and that includes it includes women, it includes young people, it includes people in informal communities, and so I think we lose a lot when we don't actually include women into the tech and the AI space. I think we lose the engine of the economy.
Absolutely. I want to go to Kita and I want to ask, why does AI and technology still feel like such a hostile space for women?
Thank you. I think, Paula, I think that is a very good question. And I think this, what Mo has brought up about the importance of human beings is that I think a lot of times we are so focused on the online world and we forget the offline world. And what research has found, and so some of my research has touched on this, is that, offline, biases and offline discriminatory practices are exacerbated online. They only become worse. Touching on the importance of women in tech and AI, on human oversight, fact checking, for instance, or how people label data, in training machine learning. we even in person, even offline, people don't believe us when we say, define harassment in a certain way. And so if you don't have, data labelers and people working on processing data in a way, or training these machines who understand what harassment is and define it in the way that we experience it, I think that means that it creates a very hostile internet in terms of women can easily be harassed. That's from a security perspective. But also, I think the women in tech as a whole, I think we are essential in stopping and perpetuating these offline patriarchal, I want to say, oppressive systems. There was a study that one of my colleagues made, and we are grossly, women and especially African women are grossly underrepresented in these spaces. They receive, tech founders, for instance, receive less funding if they are women and if they're African. And there was another study that said that, if you are a woman who is, from Africa, for instance, and have no affiliation with someone from the US, you are less likely to get funding. So it is a space, I think, that is no different from any other industry, but it's a space that really requires women to be there because of the harms that it poses to women and children and other vulnerable groups.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to bring this conversation to an end, and I don't want to end on a downer. So I'm going to ask you any concerns, but any excitement also about what's on the horizon. Kate, let's start with you. What are your concerns? What are you excited about on the horizon?
So I think when it comes to concerns, we've already mentioned technology such as ChatGPT. We have seen over decades or centuries how easy it is to manually create false information. That's been accelerated with the scale and speed at which we can disseminate it. But a lot of the tech that we're seeing evolving now that is powered by AI is able to make very convincing false arguments and create narratives and content that can easily sway people. And now this creation has been sped up. So I think that we're watching that space very closely. But as I think all the speakers have mentioned today, there are two sides to the coin. There's the negative, the potential risks that we see with this technology, but likewise, the technology which is being built to counter disinformation is also on, being developed at scale. And we hope that the technology that we've been building and that others have been developing can help users detect false information created with AI, or when people are using AI to create content for good or for education, we can use our tools to point out to them where they need to double check the content, where they need to add evidence or substantiation, where something would need to be proven if they're going to state it. So I think risks, threats, balanced with hope and excitement, and hopefully women involved in all of those steps.
Excellent. Thanks, Kate. Mo, what are you excited about?
What I'm really excited about is how this can change every and any industry. And that excites me because, in technology, sometimes you're not the person who is the tech expert in the room and you're like technology, and you're coding and you're like using all these things. But maybe your catering business can benefit from AI. So I'm excited to see, how some of these businesses that don't even enter the conversation in technology can actually, leverage technology and actually grow at scale by using AI and using other, tech innovations that will come from here on in. And I use catering as a very silly one, but what can AI do for load shedding and us being able to, predict, traffic blocks, like this, like we spend too much time in load shedding traffic right now. So how can we use AI to predict a traffic block in the heart of 4 ways so that we're able to deploy a team of traffic officers or those outsurance guys to be there in time to ensure that I'm not sitting for 3 hours in a journey that could have taken me 30 minutes. So that blows my mind. That really excites me, how there's just so many possibilities that we can actually use this to once again actually genuinely improve people's lives.
Thank you. And last word from you, Kito.
I think I'm just going to write on what Mo said. I think based on that, efficiency, hopefully we'll have more time to have space to enhance our creativity. It's very important. I'm very excited for a growing movement on the African continent, which is an Afro-feminist internet. Very excited for that. There's exciting projects like the Africa Maradi project by Mozilla, which is diversifying the internet and technology and AI. So I'm excited that we can be able to, preserve our languages and our culture and feel included without, I don't know, feeling like we're not part of the internet, but also the decentralization of media and technology. And I think it's very important that small players are always able to enter, our markets. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Mo, Kate, and Kito. Thank you so much for your time. A really interesting discussion. I wish we had more time, but really a good starting point to begin to think of what we can do as women in media to be able to use technology to do all of these new things. And we're going to have a little bit of a rhythm change for a short while, and we're going to do something really practical. I want to ask you, when we talk about resilience, what do you think? What is resilience? How do you lead through chaos? This next session is a really practical one, where we hope that you will gain some skills to deal with the challenges as you lead in media entities. Our speaker, Professor Ava Thompson-Greenwell, has had extensive experience in media, but she did something really fascinating recently. She went out to research a book on the women who actually control television news in America. She's the author of a book called Ladies Leading: The Black Women Who Control Television News. She's an academic and she's a life coach. And the process of writing the book really gave her insight into how these women deal with challenges to their leadership. So I'm going to encourage you to grab a pen and paper and do the exercises that she suggests, because they really are so useful. I was really encouraged myself to be able to have an opportunity to go through the resilience session and really to be able to benefit from it.
Good day, everybody, and happy International Women's Day. I'm so happy to be with you and so happy that Paula invited me to be a part of this wonderful, wonderful celebration. Today, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. I'm also going to be asking you to get either a pen and paper or your laptop, whatever it is that works best for you, because I do want you to write some things down. Often we go to these kinds of conferences and we walk away feeling really enthusiastic, and then we get back to work and everything remains the same. So I don't want you to leave here and be the same as when you came. So again, I'll give you a couple of seconds to grab that paper and grab that pen or whatever electronic device you use to do some writing, because I want you to do some thinking today about what it is that keeps you going and what it is that gives you staying power. And so first and foremost, again, I'd like to say to all of you that on March 8th, we're not only celebrating International Women's Day, but we're also celebrating Women's Month for the month of March. So let's celebrate. I thought that this woman was the perfect icon for all of you who are working in media as either leaders or owners of media companies. It is a tough job. Trust me, I know it. And so let's talk about that and how you are going to make sure that you are doing the work that you want to do, but also giving yourself some grace, as we would say. So first of all, I've titled this Leading Through Chaos. And boy, has there been chaos. We're coming up on the third anniversary, I guess I could call it an anniversary of COVID-19, and the impact that that has had on us personally and professionally is something that we will probably never experience in our lifetime. And so I think we need to acknowledge that we've come through a lot. And boy, if we made it through this, I feel like we can make it through anything. So I, again, am your presenter, Ava Thompson Greenwell. I'm at Northwestern University, which I'm based right outside of the Chicago area in Evanston, but we have campuses in San Francisco, Qatar, and we're also going to be opening a campus in New York very soon. So besides teaching at Northwestern, you can see here at the top, I'm lecturing actually on my documentary, which is called Mandela in Chicago. And I was just in Johannesburg about a month ago, actually talking to Mama Ponya Motsai, who is with Frey College, talking to her about my book, Ladies Leading, the Black Women Who Control Television News, and also talking to her about my documentary, Mandela in Chicago. I also have a podcast, the Ladies Leading podcast, which really is an outgrowth of the book, Ladies Leading, the Black Women Who Control Television News. And so I wrote this book because it was part of a dissertation that I was working on. I interviewed 40 Black women in the US who work at television news stations around the country. And my goal was really to get a peek behind the curtains. That's why I call it Ladies Leading, because these are ladies leading behind the scenes, behind the screens. And they are the ones who are the gatekeepers, the ones who are what I would say large and in charge. And they get to decide the content on television stations across the US. And that's a really important role that I think often we have not had a chance to really learn about and learn about their experiences. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about their experiences and how you might think about these experiences as also a way to be resilient and also a way to get through chaos. But I always want to start with family members. And this is my grandmother on the left, Iantha, and my great aunt, Eva, her sister, on the right. And I think what's really important to remember about these particular women is to make sure that you know my grandmother could only finish 8th grade. So I have a PhD. My grandmother was only able to finish 8th grade. And one of the reasons, of course, is because of all the discrimination that she experienced as a woman, but also as a Black woman. So you see her and her sister with these young white children, they could only get jobs as domestics. And so when I think about that, how far we have come, I want to say that I want to honor them. And I want to say I stand on their shoulders. So I think it's always important for us to remember to honor our ancestors and honor the people who came before us. Now, in addition to talking about my family and my grandmother, I also think it's important to really think about the jobs that we do and how important they are. So first and foremost, I want you to get out your calendars, because we all live and die by the calendar. We know that if we don't put it on the calendar, it's not going to happen or it didn't happen. But the beauty about a calendar is that it also gives us a way to look back. So I would imagine that many of you have done more in a day than many people have done in a week. So I said we were going to do 3 exercises today, and this is the first one. I want you to look back on the last week of your calendar. Maybe you have a task list that you also use, and I want you to think about reframing how you think about the things that you complete each week. For example, we often end the day thinking, oh, I didn't get a chance to finish this list of 20 things. Well, those 20 things were probably unrealistic from the beginning. If you're like me, you tend to think that you can accomplish more than you really can in a day. But often I look back, though, on that daily task list, and I actually have completed several things, in fact, many things. And that gives me certainly some joy to know that even though I didn't finish everything, I did finish some things. So again, I would like you to look at your calendar, take a minute. And if you don't have time to complete this exercise now, you can certainly complete it a little bit later. I think that what's, again, really important about all of this is having perspective and reframing what it is that you do complete so that you have a realistic expectation of what you complete in the future. In addition to that, I want to give a nod to my colleague, Inger Burnett Ziegler, who is a psychologist on our Chicago campus at Northwestern University. She wrote this book, Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, The Emotional Lives of Black Women. And I interviewed her also for the podcast, and it was just one of the best interviews that I've ever done because I could see myself in it, I could see my mother in it, I could see my grandmother in it. And she did an unofficial survey, though, asking Black women what it was that really caused them some grief and some challenges. And here is the list that she came up with. The first one, making and saving money. Number 2, microaggressions at work. And we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper for our second exercise. Number 3, being the only at work. Number 4, being the first to make it. If you're the first to make it in your family, you know that there are often extra responsibilities. Family members rely on you. They need a loan. They want your help with somebody. They want you to connect them with somebody. So that is extra intellectual work, but often extra physical work. Just plain white privilege, right? That's at work in most of the workplaces that we are in. Feeling under the microscope. This is another area that often we feel we have to work extra hard because we are under the microscope. Imposter syndrome, of course, we hear a lot about that these days. Sometimes it's just disappointing ourselves or disappointing others, maybe feeling not good enough. Again, that goes to that imposter syndrome. And then last but not least is being a provider and caretaker. You may be the main breadwinner in your household, or you may make more money than a partner in your household. And so it's really important to take stock of how these particular feelings will impact you. So in my book, again, Ladies Leading the Black Women Who Control Television News, here are a few quotes that really help us to see some of how this operates. And so Cobalt, who's the news manager, said, because you're a Black woman and people are not used to working with you, they doubt everything you say. I don't know if any of you have felt that before, but when somebody doubts what you have to say, then you begin to doubt what you have to say, meaning you begin to think, well, am I saying the right thing? And that's something that can really weigh on you. The second one was really important, Turquoise, who said, now sometimes I feel that I can say something 3 times and everybody would sort of go on their way. Then you let a white male say it, and then it's a genius idea. I call this intellectual theft syndrome because this is a sentiment that came over and over and over again in the 40 women that I interviewed for this study that ultimately became the book. Often they would say, I just said that. And when I said it, nobody listened. But when somebody else, often a white male, or sometimes someone else who's in a higher position would say the same thing, and the women felt as though they were invisible, that their ideas were invisible, and they weren't getting the credit that they deserved. And so as a result of that, this obsession of having to be as perfect as possible, having to work twice as hard, often came up. So Lily, for example, who said, I still have this obsession with failure on any project. I don't want it to be, oh, well, we put the Black chick in charge and she couldn't cut it. So Lily was just really feeling the pressure, the burden, that extra backpack, if you will, about being the first and having to represent for a whole group of people. And so that is a lot of pressure that we really have to acknowledge. And because of that, in my study, I found that often women would double check their work, triple check their work, again, just to make sure it was perfect and no one could come back and say there was something wrong. There was often this assumption of incompetence for the women that they had to grapple with on a daily basis. So today we're going to work a little bit on microaggressions and the definition of a microaggression. Again, I'm sure most of you know what it is, but for purposes today, we're going to go with this definition of a subtle, brief, verbal, or nonverbal everyday slight or indignity targeted generally at historically marginalized groups. So women of all races and ethnicities experience microaggressions. Some men experience microaggressions as well, particularly if they are part of a historically marginalized group. And so we want to use this definition as we think about, okay, there are microaggressions out there, but what should we do about them? So today I'm going to talk about how to respond to microaggressions and giving you some strategic ways to think about microaggressions and whether you want to respond at all, because sometimes the response might be no response. So the 4 areas that we want to talk about today are, first of all, recognizing a microaggression. That is, sometimes we might walk away and say, is that what I thought it was? Or we might say 12 hours later, ooh, that was a microaggression. But in the moment, I wasn't able to respond to it or even think about it as such. So the second to the right, we see ruminating, thinking about it over and over again. If you're thinking about a microaggression over and over again, it's probably something you need to do something about. But what is that something that you need to do? So we're also going to be talking about how you might respond to a microaggression. And then finally, whether you should just release that microaggression. And there's some questions that you might want to ask yourself before you're able to decide whether you want to release that particular microaggression. So let's start first with recognizing the microaggression. Here are some questions perhaps to ask yourself. What was it that bothered me about that microaggression? I had a colleague about 4 years ago. I was in a small group meeting and we were trying to hash out some things. And this colleague, who was a white male, just interrupted me and said, well, let's move on. And this was a colleague I actually liked and worked well with. And so for other colleagues, I might have just said, whatever, I'm going to move on. But this was a colleague I knew I was going to have to work with again. And it bothered me all weekend long. And I'll get to that in a minute. But is this the first time or multiple times that this person has subtly insulted you? What's the hierarchy in your organization between you and this person? If it's a peer-to-peer, okay, it might be easier to say something. If it's somebody who's your boss, it will be much harder to say something. And again, this idea of having to work with this person regularly again, as was the case for me. So again, ruminating, thinking about it over and over again, will letting it go satisfy you? In my case, letting it go was not going to satisfy me. Could I justify releasing it? No, because I knew I was going to have to work with this person again. Will not addressing the incident now mean it never happened? Again, because I had to work with this person again, I knew I was going to constantly be thinking about it. Will not addressing this now mean it will come up again for you or someone else later? That's really important to think about, that it's not only you. Sometimes you may be making an intervention, not just for yourself, but for other people who are coming behind you. What impact do you want to have on the perpetrator of the situation? Do you want the person just not to do it again? Do you want the person just to know or recognize? Because sometimes the perpetrator of a microaggression will say, well, that wasn't my intention. But what's important for that person to recognize is it's not your intention that matters so much, it's the impact that you had on that other person. Can you truly release it? Can you forget about the incident? Or will forgetting it haunt you for a long time? Or will it haunt others? Because often these microaggressions happen while others are present. So they are bystanders. And so will that devalue you in their eyes, especially as a leader? One of the things I found in interviewing the 40 women for my study is that often some of these microaggressions occurred while other employees were right there. And so they had to make sure that they exerted some kind of authority or felt as though the microaggression might have limited or devalued their authority. And so it was important for them to consider what to say in those settings. Will letting go of the incident be the best recourse for my mental health, given the current work climate? Sometimes people just aren't able to handle another incident that they have to manage or navigate or negotiate in the workplace, even when they are leaders. And so sometimes for people, they just say, I need to release this. I need to let it go at this moment because my mental health is just not in a state where I can deal with it. And then fourth and lastly is the response. How do you want to respond? Will responding make me feel better? Will a response jeopardize my job or career? And of course, a lot of that depends on the type of response. Will my response stop the behavior for me and for others? And again, oftentimes for women in the workplace, we're not just working for ourselves. We're working for other women who are in the workplace, and we're working for other women who come behind us in the workplace to really make it a better place. Will my response teach the perpetrator to police themselves better in the future? I think this is something that's really important because, as I said earlier, sometimes the perpetrator just doesn't realize what exactly they're doing. The other thing is constructing what questions in your response. You know, often, again, you're not sure what to say. So one response might be, what did you say? Something as simple as that sometimes gets the person to think about what they just said and restate it in a more positive way. Sometimes the question is, what did you mean by that statement? And asking a person what they meant by this statement sometimes can get them to, again, ask themselves, did that come off the way I wanted to have an impact on, or did it come out in a way that might have been insulting to that person? So these what questions become very, very important. And then finally, sometimes we just need to get away from the situation and we need to establish a joy kit. So I'm going to ask you again, if you would go into your writing utensil, whatever that is, and I want you to think about what brings you joy. Because taking those breaks from microaggressions, from the calendar, from the to-do list, become critical as you navigate the role that you have as a leader in media. So in my joy kit, for example, I love to have a massage. I love aromatherapy because it helps me just center myself. I love to have a facial every now and then. I love to travel. Walking is something that I can do every day when it's not too cold outside. Riding my bike, I enjoy doing that. Family, friends. And I think I'm going to let you fill out number 8, 9, and 10. So whatever your joy kit is, put a few things in your joy kit. And it's almost like when there's an emergency, and actually we shouldn't just make it an emergency. We should make it a regular part of our calendar. So with that, if you would like to contact me, here's my email address. You can either try info@ladiesleading.net or agreenwell@northwestern.edu. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Ava Thompson Greenwell, and then the website for the book, ladiesleading.net. And there's also a tab at the top for the podcast. All right, everybody, thank you so much. It was wonderful being here with you today. And I hope you have a great International Women's Day. And I hope you have a great Women's Month. Take care.
We're going to move straight along now. I'm going to actually hand over to my colleague, Shamila Bhagavat, who is the acting CEO of the Fraymedia Foundation. Shamila is going to be talking to some incredible founders about how they've grown their startup. Shamila's own work as a journalist has spanned over 3 decades, and she's reported on the negotiations leading up to South Africa's democratic elections, the Angolan civil war, the developments in Afghanistan after the fall of the Taliban, and in various newsrooms. One of the things that she was also instrumental in was the establishment of the Investigative Journalism Hub, IJ Hub, which serves investigative journalists in the region. So over to you, Shamila.
Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you. what a pleasure, and how interesting was Ava, something that all of us as women can relate to in our workplaces. So firstly, I just thank you to everyone for being here today. It's just been so amazing to hear incredible women sharing their experiences. Just feels so energizing, and so thank you. I want to say a huge thank you to the panelists I'm going to introduce now as well. Exceptional women, all of them working in different parts of the continent, in different regions. One thing in common, all of them were journalists. All of them have taken that leap and transitioned from journalism to media entrepreneurs. So very distinctive businesses, very distinctive commercial models, but so much in common, that spirit of entrepreneurship particularly. Interesting too is that all their businesses are technology driven, and that seems to be a theme today. I am going to be speaking to Lalana Bohela, who's the founder of Honest Stories. Honest Stories describes itself as Tanzania's first and only AR/VR story doing agency. So absolutely fascinating. We're also going to be talking to Varashni Pillay. Varashni also has been a journalist and started a company called explain.co.za. The World Association of Newspapers in 2021 awarded this project the best news literacy project in Africa. Quick explainers, basically aimed at people who don't follow the news and current events the way journalists do generally. And the other person we're going to be speaking to is Alia Ibrahim from Lebanon. Alia is the founder of Daraj.com. It's a multilingual website and a news agency doing amazing work in telling the stories of that region. So these three amazing women are going to be sharing with us today their entrepreneurial journeys, what gap they tried to fill, why they started their businesses, how their businesses have impacted on their environments, and some of the challenges that they've had, be it technology, fundraising, staffing. So it's just such a privilege, and I want to perhaps just say that I've asked each one of them to speak for about 10 minutes, and after they all speak, we'll open up to questions and a discussion. And I wonder if I could ask perhaps to Lalana to go first and to unmute and to begin her presentation.
Right, thank you so much. Sorry, I think there was like a little bit of a delay somewhere there. But greetings from very sunny and humid Dar es Salaam. My name is Lalana Bohela, and just for the sake of the connection, I'm just going to keep my camera off so that we can be able to have a smooth running. So my company is called Honest Stories, and we are a digital first, video first, Africa first mobile company. And my background is in journalism. I started off as a journalist at BBC in working with the Swahili and the BBC Africa service for about 8 years. And from there, I took the leap, as it were, and jumped out of a very comfortable, esteemed position to start this company. And I have a co-founder in which we started it with. And our work primarily has been, the goal was to create actually more so explainer storytelling around the news and the like. And then when we kind of pivoted, and when we saw that, the market wasn't ready for that. So we pivoted into impact storytelling and brand storytelling for brands and for agencies. And then we also pivoted also into, I got introduced, and I was very fascinated by virtual reality, augmented reality, as well as artificial intelligence. And so our model of work is kind of different in the sense that we have what we call a creator network. One thing that we saw that was a big gap here in Tanzania was that there were a lot of creatives, young creatives that were self-taught, but at some point they hit a gap, they hit like a wall where they can't go any further, they can't connect to markets, they don't understand how to pitch, they don't understand all these kind of like nuances of the either corporate or journalistic world. And so we began to offer free workshops for them to be able to connect and to be able to connect and enter into and access this world. So this creator network is of different types of people. We're talking videographers, illustrators, photographers, animators, you name it. And the database is as big as 200, and now we're around 245 people. And we kind of like grade that we offer, they're able to like grade themselves, and we also grade them in different skill sets and different levels of expertise. And they can also come and work with us on different projects and learn on the job. We like to, like, as you said, we're story doing, we like to learn by doing. So that's and so through that we've been able to take on any kind of work, whether it's our own projects or whether it's larger projects that maybe are financed either by grants or by clients, by tapping into this creator network and giving these young people opportunities to work with big brands, whether it's Vodacom or the Aga Khan Foundation or USAID and the like. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the technology side of things. I lead the Ona Stories Futures unit. It's called Ona Kesho. Ona means, Ona, I think it's like a Bantu word, like Bona, see, yeah, to see. So Kesho means tomorrow. So this Ona Kesho means see tomorrow. And we are focused on creating a playground for creative technologists. Often in these spaces of technology or the digital space, it's kind of dictated to us what we must be inventing or innovating for. So there's grants and things like that that are telling you you must innovate around water, you must innovate around health, you must innovate around, fill in the blank. But what we want to do is create a space where you innovate for what you see you want to innovate for. So this playground is an area where people are able to come, young people are able to come, creative technologists are able to come, access the technology itself, so access headsets, 360 cameras, play around with the AI, play around with these things, and be able to understand them and create solutions for the use cases or for the areas in which they see that they are to see the areas in which they feel touch their lives, that they want to create solutions for.
Thank you so much, Thulalana. So many questions, and if any of you have questions, please do put them into the chat, and we'll get back to them in a little while. The next person I would like to introduce is Aliyah Ibrahim from Lebanon. Aliyah, you have such a fascinating website and also so many questions, but please do tell us your story. Tell us the story of Daraj.
Thank you, Sharmila, and thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you today on Women's Day, and happy Women's Day to everybody. I think, yes, as you mentioned earlier, we all have something in common. I come from journalism. At the minute, I made that jump, I was working for Al Arabiya news station. It's one of the leading Arab TV stations. Before that, I worked for the Washington Post, covering the region, the Middle East region. In a nutshell, what happened is, you know, when you're working in Arab-owned media, a leading one particularly, you know, it has never been perfect in terms of censorship, etc. Being Lebanese and covering Lebanon, it was okay because in my, like, covering my own region was fine, and we could feel that there was enough space, that, and it was the best option possible. And then comes 2011 with the Arab Spring. We had what we call till today the honeymoon, when seriously we tasted what it's like to have actual freedom within our newsroom. By 2014, 2016, what we call the derailment of the Arab Spring, the honeymoon turned into a complete nightmare. What became very difficult for us as journalists, my co-founders and myself, my two other co-founders also worked for leading media, not the same, but also leading Arab media in print, though. For us, it became very clear that as media company, like we are belonging to a media that's not only not providing solutions, we were also part of the problem. Particularly when the war in Yemen started. Our companies are mostly Saudi owned, and for us it became impossible just to be part of what was very quickly turning into a propaganda machine. So this was the main reason, but it was not the only one. For us as journalists, we always knew that the problem was never in the Arab world, the lack of good journalists. We know very well that there are really good journalists. The problem was always in the ownership of the media. The media in the Arab world is owned either by the regimes or by businesses very close to the regimes. So for us, there was, if we're going to look, and you know, as somebody who has covered the Arab Spring, I mean, I covered it, I really was there. I went to Yemen in the good days. I went to Syria. I went to Libya. I went to Egypt. I've seen how ready the populations were everywhere, even if they don't have a real understanding of what democracy is. But what really derailed was the absence of the pillars, the absence of two things in particular, as far as we were concerned: independent journalism and strong judiciary. If you don't have those, you cannot never have any kind of accountability, etc. So when we started as very depressed journalists, basically quitting our jobs and having no alternative, basically, we were approached by some investors initially to start an independent media, because I belong to the generation where to produce anything for TV, you needed to be really very rich. With digital, the costs of production have come down substantially. You don't need to be a multimillionaire. You just need a little bit of money. And what is more important is the human resources. What we had that really worked for us was the enthusiasm of other journalists when we told them that, you know, when you've worked for 20 years, you have a solid network of people who know you, when you've built a name, and you've come and you said, I'm gonna create a media that is owned by journalists and controlled by journalists. How about that? And the feedback we kept getting, like, we worked for almost a year preparing for the launch of Daraj, and everybody pitched in for free. Like, the people who were working for the main media everywhere else were helping us for free. The lawyer who helped us worked for free. The person who did our business, worked with us on our business model. Everybody was really, because, you know, you were getting out of this moment of failure after believing that the Arab Spring is going to get us somewhere. So this idea of countering the ugliness we had reached in 2015, 2016, it came with a lot of enthusiasm from a lot of people. Long story short, we took a year almost. When I was working in Arabia, I still, like, my bosses can't believe that, because as a journalist, I always said, nobody talks to me about money. I do fantastic journalism. I don't care about showing expenses sheets and showing invoices and all of these things. And suddenly I find myself on the other side of the equation, where I have to make sure that I'm building a company that is sustainable, that is institutionalized, that has policies, that can grow a team, that can So I think what drove us was the passion to do the good journalism. From that moment on, I wasn't even annoyed about doing the business part of it. Daraj, as we explain it, is focused on producing impact-driven journalism, holding power into account, and giving underreported demographics a voice. And these are the two things that I think we have succeeded in doing. I mean, in 5 years, we just turned 5 in November, last November. And I think in both these areas, we were able to create a destination. Our investigations have led in my own country. We cover, by the way, one of the things that also really helped us at Daraj is that we cover the Arab world, Arabic speakers actually. And there is a huge demand for Arabic content online because we're 6% of the internet population and only 2% of the content. So there's a huge gap and a huge demand. So what we did is we started doing investigations in collaboration with ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, with Forbidden Stories in Paris, with OCCRP, and our investigations that are focused, like there is the strong network of journalists in our countries, but we are also working cross-border with journalists on the same topics, with journalists in Europe, and mostly in Europe, the ones that really led to something, and the US also. But the idea was to look at corruption in our country, a huge plague. And corruption is never, at least at a high level, it's never a local problem only. It's always enabled by partners in Europe and the US. So we did the local work. We worked with our partners elsewhere, and I can very roughly say our investigations have led, for example, in my own country, to the central bank governor, one of the most powerful people in Lebanon, to being investigated for aggravated money laundering in 7 European countries. His assets have been frozen. In Lebanon right now, he continues to be central bank governor, but he's being sued also based on the same investigations that we have published. To make a long story short, I think from the moment we started Daraj, the word "you're crazy" is the word we heard the most. We continue to hear that when we started investigating the central bank governor. This was another round of "you're completely crazy. You're going after the one untouchable person because he is everybody's banker." And this was why we chose him, because, you know, if you want the whole system to go down, you go after the banker. So I think 5 years after we had started, there is a lot we have done that was by trial and error. I mean, when at the beginning I mentioned that we were supported initially theoretically by investors who claimed, honestly, maybe truly believed that they need this kind of journalism, but when after a year of work we presented our pitch deck, they really got scared and they pulled out. And their argument was that there is no demand for this kind of journalism, and even if there is a demand, you cannot do it. So our approach to them was, let us take the time and have a proof of concept, and we will prove you wrong on these 2 points, because there is a demand and it's doable. And that's when we started working on a hybrid funding model, which is today it's 70% funded by donors, 30% by self-generated revenues. Since we come from TV and from journalistic experience with producing documentaries that we're selling for third parties as revenue, the idea for us in the coming few years is to turn the equation around to become 30% dependent on grants and 70% self-generated revenue, and of course scale our budget. It's really been, and I mean, for me, I've already worked for 20 years in journalism. I had to go back and learn things from scratch. What I love about it is this opportunity to keep learning on the go. And now it's becoming even more challenging, because introducing technology in the newsroom, introducing changing formats, looking how we're going to deal with different audiences all the time. So all of these are challenges that are requesting a very high level of open-mindedness, I think, and of risk-taking, I would say also. But it's paying off, I mean, in every way. despite the huge question marks that were very big at the beginning. There are still question marks about what the future could bring, but it's most certainly have been an incredibly rewarding experience. And I'm really happy to see that we've made the argument for independent media that is viable and sustainable in our region, of course.
Thank you so much, Alia. What a journey it's been. What a journey it's been. Before we move on to Varashni, just a thought around, and I will also ask this of Chilalana and Varashni, were there challenges you faced that you thought you faced particularly because you were a women founder, co-founder in your region?
Well, for me, the investors at the beginning, they really plainly said they did not want me to be the CEO, and they wanted my co-founder to be the CEO. And then we were interested, and I told him, it's fine, you be the CEO, I'll do the work. And then at some point, he really does not want to be a CEO. He's a journalist who does not want to sit on a table and talk to anybody. And we imposed it sort of, but at the beginning but they plainly said they did not want a woman CEO. For me, it was, I have to say, for me, saying the word CEO to myself was a challenge, because I did not see myself. I didn't even respect CEO. I was the one who was questioning CEOs all the time about the bad things that they do. So I was not comfortable saying I'm CEO. I wasn't sure that I can lead. Yeah, and it was imposed on me. It's a lot of time at my personal level. There was a lot of things happening, and honestly, there was times I say I didn't have the luxury to quit, even when it got really hard, because it was hard at the beginning, and you had today I can say that with some confidence, because I can say we have a proof of concept. I can say that we have made some really big mistakes. Thank God we've done those mistakes while being extremely well supported by really good partners. But at the same time, it was at the beginning when we get started, I left my job, which was a super well-paid job, to go into this adventure. I had no guarantees, and after a year, I've spent all the money that I after a year, I really needed to start making an income. That too is, I'm not very young. You have a lot of obligations. It's not easy to go into an adventure without any guarantees. But I think even on the worst days, there was something that just kept telling us that there is, you could see the need for this. Once you know that what you're doing is greatly needed, it's a matter of time. You're going to make mistakes 1 time, 2 times, 3 times until it works, but eventually it will work. I think, nothing was encouraging to do. All I can say, the only thing that worked for us was the experience we bring, the network we have. I cannot, none of this would have happened if we haven't worked for 20 years in the field. And my co-founders and myself are not coming from the same background. My co-founder is an incredible icon of gender, for example, in our region, and she takes care of that. Our other partner is really an expert on fundamentalism in the region, and I was more of a general reporter. So we bring the networks, just like between the 3 of us, we were really covering a very strong landscape, and it was, but otherwise we really didn't know anything. Everything was a challenge, like starting a company, like being professional about it, speaking the language of donors, moving from being employed by corporate to navigating this world that was completely new to us. But I think if you really and honestly, we had a really good project. I really think we were so passionate about it that everything else seemed like it's a detail that will be removed on the way.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to come back to that. Interesting to hear what you say around funders and the face of the organization. Very interesting. the next person on our panel is someone I actually know and I've worked with, absolute dynamic force, Varashni Pillai. Varashni also has worked as a journalist and on different platforms at different times before she moved from journalist to entrepreneur. So yeah, welcome Varashni.
All right, so Shamila has asked us to answer a few questions. So I thought I'd just do it like this. So the first question is, what prompted you to start up, and what was the opportunity gap you sought to fill? So I was personally very struck by a lot of the kind of sort of feedback I would get as a young journalist and a young editor from very in the know friends, friends who were very kind of intelligent, well qualified, who would say things to me like, "Oh, but I don't read the news. I find it confusing, or I find it too depressing." And it really struck me that many people were not reading the news, and that particularly women were not reading the news. And this felt quite a challenge to me that was being unseen by mainstream media. And so I started coming across more and more research that led me to start Explain. And some of the research said things that, so I looked at research by the BBC, by Reuters, that traditional news alienates women and younger audiences. So I like to say that the news caters to everyone, as long as you're a white, older white man. Traditionally, that's what news was made for. It was really aimed at men. It really was aimed at older men who were very sort of wealthy and who tended to be white. So the newsrooms have become more diverse and their coverage has become more diverse. But in South Africa, a lot of the mainstream news often assumed that that readers knew the entire background of the story, or that they understood the way the justice system worked. Whereas in reality, a lot of people won't know specifically how the NPA works. So when you reference NPA stories, the National Prosecuting Authority, without explaining that background, people can be left quite confused and feel quite negative about their country, even when things are going well, because they think, the justice system isn't working fast enough. But sometimes they often don't understand the nature of the intricacies of it. So I created explain.coza to create easily understandable videos and weekly news summaries that help people understand what's going on, even if they're newbies. Now, a little bit more like this is one sort of extract from one of the research from Nieman Lab that I found very interesting. And it said that news consumption fell off the to-do list completely as women juggled jobs and childcare. So we know that women take up the bigger burden when it comes to domestic work in the household, and that became particularly true during COVID. And so then the report says they often outsource news consumption to male partners or family members, think brothers or fathers. And by outsourcing it, they were relying on these men to tell them what they needed to know, even though these women are extremely smart and, obviously can understand themselves. But they are being given so much work to do, their own jobs, as well as in the domestic sphere, that they just don't have capacity to keep up with the news because of the unequal way work is distributed within the home. And they're trying to conserve their own emotional energy by avoiding news in order to better fulfill their responsibility to others. Men tend to be able to partition their minds a lot more, to kind of like do what they need to do, read the news and kind of ignore the dishes, ignore the child screaming. These are all stereotypes, of course, but we see themselves playing out in real life where relevant. So a final study that kind of inspired, that speaks to what inspired me, and this was the Reuters Institute Women in News study in 2020, and it said women will talk about news face-to-face with friends and family more than men. They are less likely to comment on news on news websites or on social media. South Africa, only 40% of those who surveyed said they comment. And what this said to me is, if you consume news in South Africa, which is my market, you'll know that it can be very negative in the comment space, a very combative, very often toxic space. A lot of news publishers have done a lot to clean that space up, but it's not necessarily an environment that a lot of women feel comfortable in. How they prefer to talk about news is one-to-one in safe spaces and in groups with people that they trust. So we took all of those learnings and we created explain.coza, and we met their need by having conversations about the news with our audience distributed via WhatsApp. And as you can see, here's one of our regular readers replying to us via WhatsApp. It feels the way that they would talk to We want to be their journalist friend who explains the news to them as we as journalists would explain to our friends who don't follow the news. We wanted to create that safe space for them. And we wanted to make it conversational, but also make it hopeful, because so we focus on solutions journalism a lot. We were solution journalism fellows with the Solution Journalism Network. We also look at the big picture and the context behind the stories. Often trends are reported in isolation and without context, which kind of skews the news. So we focus on these three things. However, we did all of that. We launched Explain, but it's currently all on hold. I just put it on hold a month ago. And I'm going to explain to you guys why that is in the next section. I've got 4 minutes left, so let me hurry up a little bit. All right, so what resources, human, financial, time did you need, and how did you decide you need this? So I launched in 2019, and I had a really well-paying job, and I realized I wanted to start my own kind of startup, and I knew that I knew nothing about business. So I applied for every kind of business, media and business fellowship I could think of, any kind of a degree, fellowship, course that was paid for that would cover my cost and learn about this. And something that I learned later on when I went for sales training in the business is that you get 1 in every 10 of new opportunities. If you apply for 10 new opportunities or 10 sales opportunities, you'll get 1 in 10. So luckily I applied for as many as I could, and it turned out to be about 10. And I got the 1 in the 10 that I applied for, but I got rejected a lot, which was quite unusual for me as a journalist, an award-winning journalist. I always got everything I applied for before. I always got, an easy ride as a journalist. And now being an entrepreneur and trying to hustle was very different for me and for my self-esteem. So that's something I had to get used to. So I won the Nelson Mandela Washington Fellowship, which was great. I went to study business for 6 weeks in the US, and that really gave me the skills I needed. I didn't know anything about business. The other people in the class were entrepreneurs, and they were laughing at I was having all these aha moments. I was like, is that how commercial works? Because I used to always work only on the editorial side. Then I came back, and as a graduate, I was allowed to apply for a grant to fund my startup, and I won it, and it was a nice amount. It was enough money to fund a mid-level employee, or actually a junior employee, for a year. And having run newsrooms before, I knew I needed help. And I had saved money from my previous job to fund my salary for about a year. Unfortunately, we launched just before COVID hit, and that was terrifying. But then what happened was that it forced us to launch the agency division, which is where we launched a parallel company that does communications work for NGOs and corporates that are mission driven. Because as we launched, and I was trying to sell advertising and just try to get money into the business, people just wanted digital communication marketing help. So I ended up starting a separate company called explainagency.co.za, which funds the journalism. And that helped us break even financially by 2021 and become less reliant on grant funding. So the idea was that we would have 4 revenue models, because everyone tells you as a media startup founder that you must have as many revenue streams as possible. Gone are the days that you can just rely on classifieds to fund your whole newspaper and 3-month reporting projects like in the golden age of journalism in the 60s and 70s. We have to have multiple revenue streams. So I thought of these 4. However, I have had to put number 3 and 4 on hold because, again, we are still struggling with the journalism side of things. And I'm going to tell you why right now. But to encourage you around the financial stuff, I started in 2020 with that small grant from the US after the fellowship that I did with the Mandela Washington Fellowship. And that was what we used for the first year. 97% of our funding came from grants, you can see here, and only 3% was commercial. By 2021, I had to bring in extra money, and that's when the agency launched. And then you'll see the grants going down to 16% and 83% commercial. And you saw this massive spike in revenue. And last year, we more than doubled our revenue because we really focused on that agency part. And this year, 2023, we are actually bringing in more grants. We're bringing in about double or maybe triple the amounts of grants we brought in our first year, but it looks small because it's dwarfed by our commercial revenue. So what's going on with Explain? We've got the money, but we cannot find the right people. And this is going to answer the 3rd, 4th, and 5th question, I think, which is what has been the biggest challenge? And the biggest challenge, I think, and the biggest learning curve has been I underestimated how important team and staff was. So in previous roles, I had a big organization behind me. I had Mail and Guardian, Huffington Post, Media 24, Power FM. Now I have a small organization. I can't offer a lot of job security. So I was hiring people on contracts. I wasn't able to get very good people. And when I did get very good people, my cash flow wasn't right. And then when I got my cash flow right, I couldn't find good people. And now I offer permanent jobs because that's how you find good people. But it's been a real uphill battle lately. And I've realized that I need to find I've realized that I really need to get people who are senior. So a mistake I made in the beginning was that I tried to run the organization with interns. And so this is some more of the senior people who have now joined my organization, and they help me. As you can see, how we're trying to overcome these challenges is that I'm doing it in team. These are people who are sitting with me and helping me think through these things. So what do I wish I knew now when I started the business? I think that I didn't try to save so much money so soon by being very cautious. I was very cautious. I didn't want to spend money. I was terrified of spending money. And so I was scared to hire people. I was scared to give people permanent contracts. I was scared to take any kind of credit out. I didn't take any loans out. And that maybe hampered my growth. And it meant that when I did find the right people, I wasn't able to keep them. And now that I have money, I'm struggling to find the right people. So that's been my personal journey and the reason we are where we are. The market's really weird. The labor market in South Africa right now for journalists and editors. So the agency is going really strong, but that's not my passion. But it's great that it's going really strong because it's going to fund the journalism. And we are hoping to pull together the right people, the right team to relaunch the journalism. The site now has a banner up that says we are currently on pause as we rethink things. And once we have the right team in place, we're going to launch with a bang, and we're really looking forward to that. So if you know of any journalists or editors looking for, or preferably just a good editor, let me know, and we are going to hopefully fly from there.
Thank you so much, Varashni. So one of the reasons that I really wanted to ask Varashni, she was quite reticent when I spoke to her because of where her business was. But that is exactly why I thought it was important to have Varashni on this panel, because growing a business is just simply not linear. And that's something I think that everyone is learning. So thank you so much, Varashni. That was very, very useful. So as we close, I think what has struck me is that all three of these businesses face exactly, the same challenges that all new businesses face. Clearly, there are some, and the growth of any business is just not linear, but also clearly there are some issues that women in particular have, especially in our regions where the conservative or just because of the economic environment or the cultural environment, that there's just simply more challenges that you have as a woman. The good thing, though, all three of these businesses, all three of your businesses seem to be thriving. And so clearly passion, having a really, really good concept and just pushing through these difficulties is what seems to be taking you to that next level. So I want to say thank you to all three of you for sharing your experiences. I think it will be helpful and useful to so many other women who are thinking of taking this leap, and just being able to see that even though there are definitely challenges, success is really possible. So thank you very much. I do hope that post this seminar today, that we've created a network among you as well, and that you continue to share your stories and share your experiences and your successes, and hopefully be able to collaborate even in some way.